was a little insensitive to do this topic when we were in the middle of the panorama that we're currently in, but I feel like it's kind of a, like, you know, it's much more of everyone's just reality, and we're kind of sort of on the other side of it now, so I thought it would be fun to do that. This is very, like, there's been a lot of pandemics, so it's basically just, like, talking about those. I used Wikipedia a lot, actually, for this, which I normally don't do. I'll use it as a starting point, but I found, like, this was, like, it had more of, like, this pandemic, and then this pandemic followed, so that was really cool. As always, my sources will be down below, and please leave whatever topics you'd like, and I will see what I can do. Sometimes things are really difficult, like recently someone wanted me to do facts about nighttime or night. So hard to find stuff. I spent like probably 4 hours, and I only got to like 20. I'm still kind of seeing if I'm gonna do that one or not, but sometimes it's really hard, like, to find things, even though you know it exists. It's just like the wording in Google can be mean. Anyways, let me pull up my document here. Okay, so yeah, we have 45 facts about pandemics, which I personally find really interesting. I am the type of person that I like to absorb as much information about certain things as possible, especially if they're, like, directly affecting me, so this was fun for me. But of course, if the pandemic is something that gives you a lot of anxiety, maybe skip this one out. Okay, cool. So let's just get started. Fact number 1. The word pandemic comes from Greek words pan, meaning all, demos, meaning local people or crowd. Pandemo, you know, pandemic. Fact number 2. The Spanish flu didn't originate in Spain. The pandemic that killed around 50 million people and infected 1/3 of the world population is called the Spanish flu, only because Spain was the country where it received the maximum media coverage. Due to World War I, there were heavy restrictions on media at the time, but Spain, a neutral country, could publish whatever it liked. This included details of the flu, which is the reason the pandemic started being associated with the country. Fact number 3. A pandemic is an epidemic of an infectious disease that has spread across a large region, for instance, multiple continents or worldwide, affecting a substantial number of people. A widespread endemic disease with a stable number of infected people is not a pandemic. Just so we're all real clear on that one. Fact number 4. Around 5,000 years ago, a pandemic cleared an entire village in China, and the dead bodies were stuffed in a house and burnt. The place is now an archaeological site called Manga. I don't know that one. I'm so sorry. My whiteness is my worst enemy. Okay. With one particular house having the remains of 97 humans, most of whom are said to be between 19 and 35 years old at the time of their death. Number 5. The most fatal pandemic in recorded history was the Black Death, also known as the plague, which killed an estimated 75 to 200 million people during the 14th century. so many people passing away due to the pandemic, finding labor became difficult and hence more expensive. The salaries of the working class increased and the system of serfdom, serfs being the lowest class of a feudal system, ended. Serfdom ended due to the Black Death. Fact number 10. The last bout of the Black Death wiped out 15% of London's population, which saw a 4-day-long fire clearing and bringing down a big part of the city. Right after the end of the pandemic, 1665 to 1666 was one of the most devastating periods in the history of London. The city saw around 100,000 deaths due to the plague, which was followed by a fire that took days to again be extinguished. Number 11. The third wave of cholera between 1852 and 1860 led to the discovery that the disease spread through contaminated water. It is interesting that the person who found that out was a British physician, John Snow. The year he made this groundbreaking discovery was the pandemic's worst year, with 23,000 deaths in Great Britain alone. Number 12. Smallpox helped Europeans colonize the continents of the Americas in the late 1400s, with around 90% of the continent's population succumbing to the pandemic. Yeah, so I feel like this is a good talking point. I made a post about this a couple days ago. It could be a week or two by the time you're seeing this, about residential schools in Canada. And so my little 2 cents on this is that the European settlers, they gave the indigenous people blankets from the Hudson Bay Company that were already infested with smallpox on purpose to kill them. Like, they knew what they were doing. And you can still buy these blankets because they're like specific Hudson Bay blankets, like the company, and you can still buy them today at the Bay. And it don't sit right with me, but let's carry on. Sorry for my little interlude. Fact number 13. Tuberculosis, once responsible for 25% of deaths in Europe, was considered to be a symbol of beauty at the time. This one's a little bit meshed up. So, in the Victorian ages, frail physique, flushed cheeks, pale complexion were all associated with beauty. Coincidentally, this is how tuberculosis made people look. In no time it became a status symbol, which is just absolutely crazy to think about. Fact number 14. The World Health Organization, or the WHO, previously applied a 6-stage classification to describe the process by which a novel influenza virus moves from the first few infections to humans through to a pandemic. It starts when mostly animals are infected with a virus in a few cases where animals infect people, then moves to the stage where the virus begins to be transmitted directly between people and ends with the stage when infections in humans from the virus spreads worldwide. In February 2020, a WHO spokesperson clarified that there is no official category for a pandemic any longer. Number 15. The 6 phases, according to the WHO, are Phase 1. No new influenza virus subtypes have been detected in humans. Phase 2. No new influenza virus subtypes have been detected in humans, but an animal variant threatens human disease. Pandemic alert period. Phase 3. Human infections with a new subtype, but no human-to-human spread. Phase 4. Small clusters or cluster with limited localized human-to-human transmission. Phase 5. Large cluster or clusters, but human-to-human spread still localized. And then the pandemic period of Phase 6. Pandemic increased and sustained transmission in general population. I feel like there should be more phases, like when, because they went up, but they don't go back down. You know what? I don't work for the WHO. Fact number 16. The basic strategies in the control of an outbreak during a pandemic are classified as containment Anyways, fact number 20. The period of Justinian, the plague of Justinian, or the Justinianic plague from 541 to 549 AD, was the first major outbreak of the first plague pandemic, the first old world pandemic of plague, the contagious disease caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. The disease afflicted the entire Mediterranean basin, Europe, and the Near East, severely affecting the Sasanian Empire and the Byzantine Empire, and especially the capital of Constantinople. 21. The plague of Justinian is named for the Byzantine Emperor of Constantinople, Justinian I, who, according to his court historian Procopius, contracted the disease and recovered in 542 AD at the height of the epidemic, which killed about a fifth of the population in the imperial capita. Fact number 22. The Antonian plague of 165 to 180 AD, also known as the plague of Galen, after Galen, the physician who described it, was an ancient pandemic brought to the Roman Empire by troops who were returning from campaigns in the Near East. Scholars have suspected it to have been either smallpox or measles. 23. The historian William H. McNeill asserts that the Antonian plague and the later plague of Cyprian were outbreaks of two different diseases, one of smallpox and one of measles, but not necessarily in that order. The severe devastation of the European population from the two plagues may indicate that people had no previous exposure to either disease, which brought immunity to survivors. Other historians believe that both outbreaks involved smallpox. The latter view is bolstered by molecular estimates that place the evolution of measles sometime after 1000 AD. 24. The 2019-2020 coronavirus pandemic is an ongoing pandemic of coronavirus disease 2019, or COVID-19, caused by severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, or SARS-CoV-2. The pandemic was first found in Wuhan, China, in December 2019, and was declared a pandemic by the WHO on March 11, 2020. The International Committee of Taxonomy of Viruses named the virus Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2, or SARS-CoV-2. I didn't know that it was a severe acute respiratory syndrome. I also didn't know that's what SARS stood for. I knew that, but I didn't know that. Okay. 25. The plague of Athens from 430 to 426 BC. During the Peloponnesian War, typhoid fever killed a quarter of the Athenian troops and a quarter of the population. This disease fatally weakened the dominance of Athens, but the sheer virulence of the disease prevented its widespread, i.e., it killed off its hosts at a rate faster than it could spread. The exact cause of the plague was unknown for many years. In January 2006, researchers from the University of Athens analyzed teeth recovered from a mass grave underneath the city and confirmed the presence of bacteria responsible for typhoid. I don't like thinking about typhoid because I just think about Typhoid Mary, and then I don't want to go to like a wedding or anything because it makes me really uncomfy. Okay. Fact 26. The plague of Cyprian population in up to half of the worst affected urban areas. It was the first of a cycle of European plague epidemics that continued until the 18th century. There were more than 100 plague epidemics in Europe during this time. The disease reoccurred in England every 2 to 5 years from 1361 to 1480. By the 1370s, England's population was reduced by 50%. The Great Plague of London from 1665 to 66 was the last major outbreak of the plague in England, and it killed approximately 100,000 people. 28, fact 28, number 28. The third plague pandemic of 1855. Starting in China, it spread into India, where 10 million people died. During this pandemic, the United States saw its first outbreak, the San Francisco plague of 1900 and 1904. Today's product cases of plague still occur in the western United States. I didn't know that happened, you know, the plague just seems like an ancient thing to me, but I guess it's not. 29, fact number 29. Researchers concluded that syphilis was carried from the New World to Europe after Columbus's voyages. The findings suggested Europeans could have carried the non-venereal tropical bacteria, where the organisms may have mutated into a more deadly form in the different conditions of Europe. The disease was more frequently fatal than it is today. Syphilis was a major killer in Europe during the Renaissance, between 1602 and 1796. The Dutch East India Company sent almost 1 million Europeans to work in Asia. Ultimately, fewer than a third made their way back to Europe. The majority died of disease. Disease killed more British soldiers in India and South Africa than war. I just realized that my shirt was corduroy. Anyways, fact number 30. Encounters between European explorers and populations in the rest of the world often introduced epidemics of extraordinary virulence, especially with smallpox and measles. Number 31. The Greek physician Hippocrates, the father of medicine, first described influenza in 412 BC. 32. The 1889 to 1890 flu pandemic, also known as the Russian flu or the Asiatic flu, was first reported in May 1889 in Bukhara, Uzbekistan. By October, it had reached Tomsk and the Caucasus. It rapidly spread west and hit North America in December of 1889, South America in February to April 1890, India in February-March 1890, and Australia in March-April 1890. The H3N8 and H2N2 subtypes of the influenza A virus have each been identified as possible causes. It had a very high attack and mortality rate, causing around 1 million fatalities. 33. The Asian flu from 1957 to 58. An H2N2 virus, first identified in China in late February. It caused about 2 million deaths globally. 34. The Hong Kong flu from 1968 to 69 was an H3N2 virus, first detected in Hong Kong in early 1968 and spread across the world, lasting until 1972. The pandemic killed approximately 1 million people worldwide. 35. The swine flu from 2009 to 2010, an H1N1 virus first detected in Mexico in early 2009. Estimates for the mortality of this pandemic range from 150 to 500,000. I actually H1N1, I really remember I was in high school at the time. I think I was in like 8th grade, and I remember being vaccinated for it. And I wasn't really that worried. I just remember, going to get vaccinated, and then I didn't feel very well. fever, and ship fever for its habits of spreading widely in camped quarters such as jails and ships. Emerging during the Crusades, it had its first impact in Europe in 1489 in Spain. During fighting between the Christian Spaniards and the Muslims in the Granada, the Spanish lost 3,000 to war casualties and 20,000 to typhus. 37. During the 30 Years' War, from 1618 to 1648, about 8 million Germans were killed by bubonic plague and typhus. 38. Fact number 38. Smallpox was a contagious disease caused by the variola virus. The disease killed an estimated 400,000 Europeans per year during the closing years of the 18th century. During the 20th century, it is estimated the smallpox was responsible for 300 to 5 million deaths. As a result, as recently as the early 1950s, an estimated 50 million cases of smallpox occurred in the world each year. 39. After successful vaccination campaigns throughout the 19th and 20th century, the WHO certified the eradication of smallpox in December of 1979. To this day, smallpox is the only human infectious disease to have been completely eradicated, and one of 2 infectious viruses ever to be eradicated, along with rinderpest. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but like my mom and my grandparents and my dad and all that, they have like that giant hole in their arm from when they got their smallpox vaccine. It's not like a giant hole in their arm, it's just like a hole in their arm from where the vaccine goes, and it's just like kind of cool to think about that. My mom's is really prevalent though. I don't notice it on other people, but hers is really big. I don't know what's up with that. So fact number 40. Historically, measles was prevalent throughout the world as it is highly contagious. According to the U.S. National Immunization Program, by 1962, 90% of people were infected with measles by age 15. Before the vaccine was introduced in 1963, there were an estimated 3 to 4 million cases in the U.S. each year. Measles killed around 200 million people worldwide over the last 150 years. In the year 2000 alone, measles killed some 777,000 worldwide out of 400 million cases globally. 41. Measles is an endemic disease, meaning it has been continually present in the community, and many people develop resistance. In populations that have not been exposed to measles, exposure to this disease, newly diseased, whatever, can be devastating. 42. Leprosy, also known as Hansen's disease, is caused by Bacillus microbacterium lepra. I probably butchered that, I'm so sorry. It is a chronic disease with an incubation period of up to 5 years. Since 1985, 15 million people worldwide have been cured of leprosy. Historically, leprosy has affected people since at least 600 BC. Leprosy outbreaks began to occur in Western Europe around 1000 AD. Numerous leprosa or leper hospitals sprang up in the Middle Ages. Matthew Paris estimated that the early 13th century there were about 19,000 of them across Europe. 43. Malaria was once common in most of Europe and North America, where it is now, for all purposes, non-existent. Malaria may have contributed to the decline of the Roman Empire. The disease became known as Roman fever. Plasmodium falciparum, no, that one was bad, falciparum, became a real threat to colonists and indigenous people alike when it was introduced into the Americas along with the slave trade. Malaria devastated the Jamestown colony and regularly ravaged the South and Midwest of the United States. By 1830, it had reached the Pacific Northwest. During the American Civil War, there were more than 1.2 million cases of malaria among soldiers of both sides. The southern U.S. continued to be afflicted with millions of cases of malaria into the 1930s. 44. may contribute to the reemergence of diseases that are currently well controlled. For example, cases of tuberculosis that are resistant to traditionally effective